Our next speaker promises to stir the pot a little bit based on a follow-up to Wayne's talk. Pamela Hengeveld is a consulting biologist living in British Columbia, and she's going to give us an overview of programs in BC. Take it away, Pamela.
Okay, you can hear me and see my screen, correct?
Yes, very well.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I was going to say, and now for something completely different, but it's actually not a bad follow-up at all, I think, to Wayne's presentation. And I'm going to give you some food for thought this afternoon. That's what I'm here to do. My talk is titled Looking Forward, Insight from 20 Years of Sheep and Goat Research. And I'm a self-employed registered professional biologist in British Columbia. I may actually turn my camera off at some point. I'm not quite sure if I've got the bandwidth for this. Let me just do that. I'm also the president of the Association of Professional Biology, an organization whose members are accredited biologists, students, and retired biologists in British Columbia and Alberta. Biology, especially in remote wild places, is not a solo career. I would like to introduce my colleague, Clint Coverley. He's an exceptional biologist, and our work together over the last 20 years would not have been possible without his contributions to the projects that I'm going to be talking about. Over the last 10 years, professional biology has been going through profound changes, including full implementation of a new Professional Governance Act in British Columbia this month. This act provides greater ability to enforce standards of professional practice across disciplines and ultimately will raise the bar on public and regulatory expectations of professional biologists. In thinking about what this will mean for our profession in the future, and looking back over the first 20 years of my career as a sheep and goat biologist, I would like to share my perspective with you. I'll start by providing some context on the academic and applied research projects that we've led or contributed to in BC over the last 20 years, and then I'll highlight professional challenges encountered in implementing these projects. When we're asked what we do for a living, our response is often met with a mix of wide-eyed fear and admiration. You're a biologist, they say? I've never met one of those before. You must work for government. Well, no, actually, we're self-employed. How does that work? We write proposals and submit them to funding agencies. It's how we've earned our living ever since our employee positions were downsized many years ago. For clarity, the practice of professional biology can take many forms, and for the purpose of this presentation, I'll be referring to these three groups in particular: government biologists, non-government biologists, and academic biologists. My own career has evolved as an independent fish and wildlife research ecologist. I'm also known as a non-government biologist, a wildlife consultant, or the most derogatory of terms, a contractor, which always seems to be said with some condescension. I have focused primarily on longer-term projects of 5 to 10 years, and these field-based studies have progressed through a lot of changes in technology over the last 20 years, from physical data collection and manual VHF telemetry to desktop delivery of animal locations and mortality text messages 24 hours a day. I got my start with wild sheep research working for Parks Canada in 1997, living amongst the bighorns of Kootenay National Park that I was responsible for tracking and counting daily. The following year, I moved to northern BC, eventually reigning as the queen of the Vomit Comet, flying 10 hours a day in small planes 3 times a week to track over 100 VHF radio-collared moose, caribou, wolves, and mountain goats over a remote area larger than Vancouver Island. I was involved in the first stone sheep tick ecology and disease monitoring project at Rainbow Rocks in the Williston region. And for both Clint and I, our first involvement in long-term research projects was on mountain goats in the first forest industry partnerships to test adaptive management of mountain goat access to low elevation mineral licks. This project was a VHF telemetry project with film-based cameras and infrared triggers across trails, and mountain goat use of several lick complexes was monitored with a series of remote telemetry base stations. I did my MSc research in Marco Festa-Bianchet's lab. Hello, Marco. My work looked at the first provincial assessment of horn growth trends in 2 bighorn sheep ecotypes, and also did an assessment of metapopulation recovery following bighorn sheep die-off attributed to pneumonia. The Sulphur 8 Mile Stone Sheep project was a 5-year project, and the first large-scale telemetry-based habitat use and demography study of thin-horned sheep, including the first radio collaring of male sheep in a BC wild sheep research project. Clint and I managed all aspects of this project, from implementation through reporting, with direction from stakeholder and science advisory committees. This was a memorable day, giving this guy his privacy back, taking off the radio collar that he'd been wearing for 2 years and letting him go unencumbered. The emergence of Soroptic mange in BC bighorn sheep took us back home to the Okanagan to lead a collaborative project. The first year of that project is the year that we were involved. It focused on survival, recruitment, and habitat use monitoring and developing relationships with 3 First Nations to support longer-term collaborative work. In this project, with the convenience of satellite collars now, we were able to do near real-time mortality investigations. And a midnight mortality investigation on a Saturday night during a 40-degree July heat wave resulted in publication of the first reported case of heart failure in a wild sheep. There is more information available about these projects if you're interested in the details. Let me just go back there. Looking back, there were many firsts, both for us personally and for sheep and goat research generally. I'm proud of the accomplishments and the work that it took to reach those milestones. But there are also profound disappointments in this profession. It wasn't until we were entrenched and invested in the S8M Stone Sheep project that I fully understood the politics of wild sheep management, how closely government aligns itself with hunting lobby special interests, and what that means for independent science. Now, I know that an allegiance between government and hunting groups is not news in this forum, and I say that with tongue in cheek. But the repercussions of this alliance for scientific research are never openly discussed. In 15 minutes, I can only provide a very superficial treatment of a deep-rooted issue, but I'd like to crack the door open just enough to get you thinking about whether this relationship truly serves our profession, or at a minimum, whether it is acceptable professional practice. In an article in the fall 2012 issue of Wild Sheep Foundation magazine, Kevin Hurley asks 2 important questions. Kevin, who was a state biologist in Wyoming for almost 30 years before joining the Wild Sheep Foundation as conservation director, wrote, "Something that I always tried to instill in the guys I worked with and the guys I supervised was to remember who they were working for." The quick answer to that question was, I work for Agency X. But the correct answer was, and is, I work for hunters. The BC government seems to agree, favoring not just hunters, but fanatic sheep hunters in regional biologist positions, wearing their hearts on their sleeves. This is not coincidental or subtle. It's a deliberate recruiting process in BC government. Yes, these biologists have professional credentials, but being recognized as a hunter is more important to their job and identity than their credentials as a biologist. So I ask, is this a problem? Kevin doesn't think so. He went on to write, "I've often posed this comment through the years. Tell me the downside of this statement. Guys who manage your wild sheep and mountain goat hunting opportunities also like to hunt wild sheep and mountain goats. The clear answer is that there's no downside to that statement. If you happen to have a wildlife biologist or conservation officer in your area who also enjoys sheep hunting, count yourself very fortunate. From my perspective, management systems that align government regulatory agencies with special interests has many downsides for research, for scientific research and management. Government employees, including biologists and resource managers, are by definition public servants. There's an expectation that public servants work in the public interest. Perpetuating and reinforcing the false idea that they work for hunters, who are not representative of the general public at large and are therefore a special interest group, creates a clear conflict of interest. If you layer on top of that the idea that biologists are ideally hunters themselves, it enables self-serving personal agendas and institutional bias for specific ideals and outcomes in wildlife research and management. Entertaining actual or perceived conflict of interest of any kind breaches a fundamental code of ethics in professional practice, and is one of the biggest reasons why our profession is now subject to higher standards of accountability under the new rules of professional governance in British Columbia. An allegiance also creates exclusive and powerful clubs that are empowered as self-serving gatekeepers in research and management. Externally, we don't have control over who's in the club, but by enabling the alliance of special interests, we give the club permission to exist. The alliance exerts power and influence through subjective review of research permit applications and funding proposal submissions. Stakeholder groups invited to sit on funding review and policymaking committees are almost exclusively hunter-centric. An alliance also legitimizes corrupt and unscrupulous behaviors by emphasizing that special interest groups are perceived to be essential to wildlife research and management to the exclusion of other interests. It also devalues science and professional practice by creating power structures that science, and independent scientists in particular, can't compete with. The alliance brands what's considered acceptable science by filtering information through a singular self-serving lens. In other words, wildlife science is being branded to the point that the only acceptable expertise, as far as the alliance is concerned, is that of the hunter conservationist. It's no wonder that science has been so heavily corrupted by lobby groups when our governing institutions are perpetuating and reinforcing the biases. The alliance also devalues professional practice by elevating the status of hunter conservationists and providing opportunities for unskilled labor to replace professionals. This also does not align with professional standards of practice. The allegiance between government and hunting interests is particularly problematic for non-government biologists whose work and salary depend on writing successful funding proposals. I have some examples of how this allegiance to special interests at the expense of scientific integrity has manifested itself as a cost in my career. Ironically, it was at my first Wild Sheep and Goat Council Symposium that I found out that there is a club, an exclusive community, or as Helen referred to it yesterday, a family, which made me think of the Godfather movies, the way she said it. I found out there was a club, that I wasn't going to be a part of it. I just didn't know it at the time. At the 2006 Kananaskis Symposium, I presented both the GOAT project and the beginnings of my MSc on artificial selection on horn growth in BC bighorns. The former was easy because it was so familiar. The latter was nerve-wracking. I was a student not yet confident about the concepts I was trying to relay to what I understood was a highly academic audience. My presentation was also overshadowed by a buzz in the room. The proceedings of the 14th Symposium had just been released, and it contained a compilation by Wayne Heimer of critiques of a paper published by Coltman and Marco and others in Nature. That compilation, published without giving the authors a chance to respond, referred to a sheep management community that included only those who do not agree with the paper. The compilation provided a data-free defense of the status quo in sheep management. That day, I learned that Marco is apparently not part of the club, and by association, however weak that link may be, neither am I. For the record, I did not discuss this with either Marco or Wayne or others in advance of this presentation, so anything I'm saying is entirely my my ideas that I'm sharing. A few years after I finished my master's degree, Reg Prosterby, president of the Alberta Wild Sheep Society at the time, called me because he was interested in my help with hunting regulations and sheep management. To satisfy his directors, he asked me if I hunted. Though I felt that it should be irrelevant, I answered honestly. Yes, I hunt. I own firearms. I get a hunting license annually, but I don't hunt sheep. Satisfied, he then had to ask me if I was part of Marco's propaganda agenda, which confused me, so he clarified. He asked me to send him a copy of the JWM paper that I had co-authored with Marco about my master's work, which I did. I sent it to him. And then I never heard from him again. I now know that my own exclusion from, in quotes, the established sheep management community isn't personal, was in many ways founded before my career started, and was, at least in part, cemented as an unintended consequence of my postgraduate education. I learned from Marco's presentations at the Wild Sheep Society conferences that you should start your presentation with pictures like this to show that you're sympathetic to the Alliance, that you're one of them with your boots on the ground. I don't have any philosophical objection to hunting, and I figured it wouldn't hurt to let people know I can hold my own in the wilderness, on gun ranges, in the boys' clubs. But I later learned that this doesn't work. A show of camaraderie, while appreciated, doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is whether or not you subscribe to the creed, upholding and exalting club philosophy and rhetoric. Being part of the club means adopting the creed of science-based management as touted by hunting lobby groups, a jury-rigged and convenient version of science that is more political tool than purveyor of truth. As a scientist, I was trained to accept science as an experimental process free of personal agendas, where bias is either eliminated or accounted for through controls. As a registered professional, I'm bound by a code of ethics that includes acknowledging conflict of interest and ensuring fair treatment and due regard for others. Somehow, neither of those concepts seem to hold much weight in the world of wild sheep biology. How does the Alliance serve as a gatekeeper in research and management? The institutional bias supports a management structure that confers excessive personal power and influence to control both permit approvals and the flow of project funding for non-government biologists. The system not only enables, but encourages personal agendas to trump credible science and accredited non-government biologists. All it takes is the perception that you're deliberately or suggestively infringing on perceived rights and freedoms and doctrines associated with hunting. The slightest whiff creates fear among the gatekeepers, and with one swift kick, you're out. The current situation is so extreme that resident hunters, outfitters, trappers, and the various layers of lobby groups that they form together are working to deliberately exclude biology professionals from wildlife research and management opportunities. And they are doing this with government support. Does this matter? These experiences are not unique and are not happening to me alone. This is not a personal issue. Neither is it limited to wild sheep and goat management. It happens because it's the way the system is designed to work, protecting government interests and lobby group agendas. When research and management are focused on special interests, and when permits and funding can be manipulated by those interests, everyone loses. The perceived need for professionals to align with or compete with special interest groups is a disappointing scar on our profession. This is not professional practice. This is not good science. As silly as it sounds, the conflict between government and non-government biologists is predicated on the fear that non-government biologists will take away government opportunities. There is so much work to be done that I don't see how that could ever be the case. But to work effectively, especially in complex projects, independent accredited scientists need to be afforded opportunities for autonomy. Independent biologists are an important resource for leadership, capacity, and expertise in wildlife research and management. I understand that politics will always have some part in wildlife management, but if we don't do a better job of supporting the various roles, disciplines, and perspectives in science and professional practice, then we are giving up opportunities for real progress. Under new rules of professional governance, biologists are going to be held to higher standards of personal conduct and professional practice. In a perfect world, I should have another 20 years of contributions to sheep and goat research. I have an expectation that working hard leads to more opportunities, not closed doors. The fundamental question is, does all of the expertise, credibility, credentials that we earn through our work and our academic training matter? My experience in the sheep and goat world tells me no. My heart says yes. I'm sharing my story with you because at least some of you in this room already are, or likely will at some point encounter the same types of challenges, and may be able to speak up sooner knowing that you're not alone. If what I'm saying is familiar, I hope that you will share your story. Government biologists, I challenge you to see the bias in your institutions and acknowledge the consequences that actions may have for others. Academic mentors, prepare your students, share your experiences, give your students advice on how to confront or manage these types of situations. Students, you have permission to challenge the status quo. If what I've said resonates with you, whether you are irked because you disagree or ignited because you've experienced this yourself, contact me. I'd love to hear your experiences, your stories, and your perspectives on what the next 20 years of wild sheep and goat research will look like.
Thank you, Pamela. I'm sure that this will stimulate some discussion, but you pretty well burned up your time. And there is a little Q&A button at the bottom there. And if anyone has any questions or comments, you can enter them there, and Pamela can respond to you. So